You're listening to the Travis Makes Money podcast presented by GoHighLevel.com. For a free 30-day trial of the best all-in-one digital marketing software tool on the planet, just go to GoHighLevel.com/Travis. Hey, what's going on, money makers? Welcome back to the Travis Makes Money podcast, where it's our mission to help you make more money. If you are new to the show, we release brand new conversations with unconventional money makers every single day of the week. Now, you might be listening to this maybe on another feed or app or something like that. So if you haven't yet, please be sure to go to your podcast app of choice right now. Hit the follow button, hit the subscribe button so you never miss an opportunity to make more money. And while you're there, if you want to leave us a quick rating and review, we would be eternally grateful to you, as it really does help us out on the show tremendously. Today on the show, we're going to be talking about acquiring companies with my new friend, Ross Tomkins. Ross has raised over $10 million in the last few years, acquiring almost 20 businesses on 2 different continents. He's just incorporated a new holding company in the UAE. And the goal is to generate $500 million in annual revenue in the next 5 years. So Ross knows a thing or two about scouting and acquiring companies and getting them to cash flow. And I'm sure we're going to talk about a couple of those things here today on the show. So Ross, what's up, man? Welcome to the show.
Fantastic for having me. Oh, thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. Let's jump right in with softball question here, get things started. Tell me how you made your first dollar, Ross, and tell me how you made your most recent dollar.
What a fantastic question. So my first dollar, I'm a physiotherapist by background.
Okay.
Worked in the NHS, the UK health system, for a very short period of time, and realized that that wasn't for me. So I guess I was in my employed dollar. But my first dollar I made for myself was I decided to set up my own company. And I literally was a mobile physiotherapist. So I bought a bed that could transport with me, and I would go to someone's house and I would treat them in their own home rather than them having to go to a clinic. So my first dollar was me carrying a bed with me to someone's house and charging them for physiotherapy.
So why couldn't you be an employee, Ross? What happened?
I didn't like being told what to do when it came to healthcare, when it came to my clients. So I wanted to spend an hour with them. I wanted to give them absolutely everything. And in the NHS, I had 20 minutes and they wanted me to see 3 people at the same time and things like that. So we had a difference of opinion.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, I always tell people the entrepreneurial itch is really just the desire to make more money combined with an inability to listen to authority. And it sounds like you had that.
100%.
So how did you initially make that switch? There's a lot of people that would love to do exactly what you just did. But we just skipped over potentially months of anxiety, stomach aches, stress, just thinking about letting go of a full-time guaranteed income to go chase something that has zero guarantee that it will be successful. Talk to me about your decision-making process during that time. How did you handle personal finances? Were you trying to save money up before you made this jump? Talk to me about the logistics about actually switching from doing something full-time to pursuing your own thing.
Again, wonderful question. So, it was my wife that pushed me to do it, and she's continued to be my biggest supporter and my sort of rock throughout our growth. So having her with a full-time job as well gave us a little bit more security.
Nice.
But also I was able at the time, the job, the vocation physiotherapist was in high demand. So I was actually able to get a part-time job somewhere else that gave me a couple of days a week guaranteed income. And then that allowed me to almost start mine as a side hustle. So in my first year, I made £12,000 in my business. But because my wife was working and because I had a side gig as well, if you like, I was able to slowly transition into a full-time business owner.
Yeah, I love that, man. Do you have any advice for somebody out there who's listening and goes like, "Man, that sounds awesome that your wife was that supportive." I feel like I haven't been able to figure that one out yet. Whether it's wife or husband or whoever it is, there's an unsupportive party in the marriage or the relationship. Because man, I'm right there with you, dude. Like, there's zero chance that any of the things that I have or that we've been able to accomplish, like none of it would have happened if I didn't have a supportive wife to like help me out along the way and at least just believe that I was capable of doing some of these things. So what would be your advice for somebody listening who maybe doesn't have that, maybe doesn't feel that support at home?
I think the best conversation we had at the beginning was she asked if I wanted to do it or needed to do it.
Hmm.
And I needed to do it. I needed to do it for myself. I needed to do it for my family. I needed to do that I could prove to myself that I could do this. And when she heard me answer that way, she said, fine, I'll support you, whatever it takes. Because this isn't a fanciful thing. You don't just want to do it. You don't hope it'll be excess. Like, it's part of you. It's who,
Yeah.
it's in your DNA. So I'd encourage someone to have that question and dive into whether they want to do it or need to do it with their partner. And for us, that was a tremendously transformational conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, it's always been helpful to like paint the picture of where we're going to. Like there's a reason that we're going to sacrifice in the short term. There's a reason that we're not going to move into that house, or we're not going to buy that piece of furniture, or we're not going to get that car. We're not going to make these kind of, silly Jones effect upgrades in our lives, because we're heading somewhere.
Mm.
And if we're not both on the same mission to head there, then my job is infinitely more difficult and potentially impossible to get us there. But it's also like I can't just expect her to hop on board for a future that I can't define or that I can't paint for her. So it's also kind of dependent on me to be able to communicate that clearly and ask for the things that I want rather than hoping she reads my mind about it. Like there was a couple of times, man, where I sat down and I was like, I like right now, I need you to also be working, and this, like, before we had kids, it was like, right now, this is the position that we're in, and I'm going to be taking a couple of big swings over here, and we need to make sure that like there's still a roof over our heads. You know what I mean? So like in the meantime, I'm going to need some help, but communicating that clearly with her, like she was like, okay, cool. I'm on board. It's not like she was afraid of working. She just like, it just wasn't how we were raised, and it was different.
Yeah.
And she was always like working to some degree. So it was just easy just to sit down, not easy, but it's simple when you think about it. Sometimes the conversation is not easy, but it's simple to sit down and just be like, this is how I'm feeling. This is where we are. It might take a hit on my ego to admit that I need some help here, but I need some help. And if we're both if we're both on the same team and our team is heading toward this mission, then this is what's required from both of us at the moment. And like I said, luckily I had somebody who was willing to always jump on board every step of the way.
Eloquently put.
Yeah. Well, let's move into the next phase of the career then, Ross. So clearly this ended up going fairly well for you. And I'm sure she's very happy that you took that jump, however many years ago it was, because now you have created millions, tens of millions in enterprise value in multiple business acquisitions spanning a couple different continents, starting a new company now in the UAE, moving from the UK. Talk to me about that journey. What happened with that first business, and why did you get into operating businesses for a living?
So we grew the first business organically, and we grew it using strategic partnerships and joint ventures. We grew that up to 35 members of staff. And the world was looking good. And then we lost our biggest contract. And as the story often goes, it's a period of pain and discomfort that causes somebody to think differently and inspires growth. And when we lost our biggest contract, I had to think, outside the box. and actually stumbled across the fact that even smaller business like us, and so we only had a 35 headcount, was that we could grow through acquisition. And I'd never considered that before. So I threw myself into this new area of business. Before that, I was learning about sales and marketing and joint venture partnerships. And then I started learning about finance and mergers and acquisitions. And we quite quickly acquired two other physio practices. Then we went up and down our supply chain and we bought a medical supplies and pharmaceuticals business, a medical device company. We went up the timeline and we bought a home care business. We actually bought four of those. We then went up to some of our suppliers and we bought a health and safety business, or OSHA, I think you call it over there. So that was kind of how we started growing the ecosystem. But it was literally out of necessity that we started thinking differently.
Huh.
And that led on to this sort of world of small business acquisition.
Where did you come up with the cash? Like, how were you buying the businesses? Was a lot of seller financing deals? Like, when you first got in, were you thinking like, man, this is like this would be super nice, but we're in this position because like we're not flush with cash here. Like we have to figure out new ways of growth because these other ways we've been investing in aren't working. I assume you had to get really creative with a couple of these deals at first.
The first business was actually 100% seller finance.
Mm. So talk to me
So
about that. For somebody listening who does not know what that means, lay that out. And if you can, like, give us as many specifics of the deal as you can. I know maybe there's potentially some NDAs and things like that. So whatever you can give us, give us.
Sure. So seller finance is where essentially the seller of the business becomes the bank and they lend you the money and you just pay them over time, typically out of future profits.
Hmm.
So this particular deal, another physiotherapist and his wife owned the business. They'd been approached by a lot of bigger companies before, and they'd always disagreed on the fact that they were just a big corporate who wanted to incorporate them into their clinics. They thought that the bigger corporates saw clients just as numbers, whereas they saw me as a smaller acquirer, as someone that shared similar values.
Hmm.
They knew we were going to keep the name the same. They knew we were going to look after the staff. They knew we were going to treat the patients in the same way. So we were able to make a really strong connection. So when they said, "How much do you think it's worth?" and I explained, they agreed, even though their initial hope had been it was worth a little more. We gave great reasoning. They then said, "Oh, you're going to pay us all the money up front," and I said, "I've got to be honest with you, I haven't got any money. I was hoping we could do a deal where I could pay you over time." And they said, "Actually, that works really well because both of their health was failing. They needed time just to spend on each other and looking after each other's health. And that gave them guaranteed income for the next 3 years."
Yeah.
So it was a win-win situation.
Yeah. That's what I really wanted to hammer in on is that when you initially think about these deals, you're like, who would do the deal? You know, like that's the first thing that pops up in your head is like, but why wouldn't they just sell to this company and get cash up front? Even if it was a little bit like, why would you take a deal like this where there's no risk for the buyer and it's all the risk on the seller? And just like, well, the bottom line is, man, like there's just so many businesses out there that aren't poised to sell anyway. And sometimes like it's like that. They're in a situation where they're like, man, we've run this business for 15 years and just beating our heads against the wall. We just want out. And frankly, like if we know that our client base and our customers are taken care of, we're happy to sell to somebody like you rather than going to this other deal. And so there's opportunity out there. The question is, how did you come across some of these deals? Like when you say like we went up the supply chain, then we went over here, we it sounds like you basically were just acquiring vertically within your space to make the enterprise value of the whole organization that much better and that much greater for potential acquirer down the road. How did you go about actually finding these deals, getting in touch with the owners and initiating that conversation?
So in a variety of ways, and I think a good way to explain it is one of my very first mentors explained to me that in all businesses, you have £10 tasks, £100 tasks, and £1,000 tasks. £10 tasks is admin, £100 tasks is finance and sales, marketing, and £1,000 tasks are talking to other business owners, are talking to accountants, are talking to lawyers, are talking to financiers. The type of conversations that can dramatically change a business. So what I focused on was those £1,000 tasks, and we outsourced everything else. So we outsourced all of that lead generation to virtual assistants. They would be contacting people on email and on LinkedIn. And I was focused on my network. So I was talking to business owners, accountants, lawyers, private equity houses. And over the years, what happened is my network grew, and then people started bringing deals to us. So now I would say a third of our deals come directly to me from our network. A third come through LinkedIn and our marketing outreach campaigns. And a third come from business brokers. So there's a huge network of thousands of business brokers out there that are actively looking to sell businesses. So about a third come from there.
Wow. So now, are you still in the same vertical, in the same industry or niche, or did you offload that business and now you're looking at different sectors?
So we offloaded that first business. It was an occupational health and physiotherapy business. We built that up and sold it. Um, to a large degree, we're still in health.
Okay.
So we have a medical supplies, pharmaceuticals business, medical device company, a men's health business, which is largely in hormones and the longevity space.
Okay.
We've just taken an equity stake in a dietetics company over in Australia. We've just invested in an online fitness company as well. So it's predominantly healthcare driven,
Okay.
which comes from my love of that industry.
Yeah, sure.
As I think I said to you just off air before, this afternoon, straight after this, I've got a call. We're looking to take a stake and invest in an AI company.
Okay.
We also have equity in a recruitment business as well.
Okay. Got it. Got it. So when along the way did you start raising capital for these deals?
The second deal. So the second deal we did was our medical supplies and pharmaceuticals business.
Okay.
We actually raised debt for that. So we used something called an EFG, which existed in the UK at the time. And in the US, the equivalent would be the SBA 7A loan, I think it's called,
Okay.
which is a government-backed loan. So although there's a personal guarantee, there's some backing from the government as well. So initially, we started raising capital using debt.
Okay.
After that, we then moved on to using angel syndicates, and now we're talking to family offices.
Well, the cool thing about the debt part of this as well is that these government-backed financing vehicles will finance against the revenue of the existing business, which is super cool, right? Meaning that the debt service is covered by the profit of the company that you're acquiring, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're loans predicated on the target that you're acquiring, whereas traditional lending tends to be predicated on your existing business.
Right.
Which if you've had a bad year or you're quite small and you want to buy a bigger business will cause you a problem. But these type of facilities are designed to allow you to acquire a profitable cash flowing business.
So if you were doing it all over, would you start your own thing again, or would you just go directly into acquiring?
I honestly would start again the way that we did, because actually owning that business gave me a lot of credibility, and it allowed me to build rapport with business owners far easier than if I was coming in cold. So I think it really allowed me to accelerate the process, and it's been a bit like a domino. So, we had our first business, we then did our first acquisition, and then since then things have accelerated. So we've done 4 acquisitions in the last 70 days, since the start of the year.
Wow.
And we'll probably do another 5 this year. So we're just sort of getting started, which is how we're so bullish on our next 5 years target.
Yeah, we bring up a really good point though. That there's no shortage of online gurus that say this is the way and this is the way and this is the way and do it my way, do it my way, do it my way. And I mean, frankly, I try to give people the benefit of the doubt. I think a lot of it comes from just like, hey, I figured out this really cool thing and I think it's awesome. Everybody should do it like this. It's like, it's done from a point of passion in a lot of cases. Some cases it's done from a point of ignorance where they literally think it's the only way to make money, which is not the case. And if somebody's telling you this is the only way, then run the opposite way because they have something to sell you. But in a context like this, it seems like there's a bunch of people that are saying, acquire your business, acquire a business, acquire it. You don't have to start something from scratch. But to your point, if you didn't learn those, what you call it, thousand pound tasks,
Yeah.
versus 10,000, like if you didn't learn how to the principles, the basics of operating a company, the ops, the processes, the HR, the hiring, the firing, the marketing, the sales, the lead gen. Like if you didn't have an understanding of these principles, you could acquire a business that's profitable and then just run it into the ground, right? Like this is not a guarantee. This is not just like buying a turnkey real estate property where there's a property manager and you just put your money in and then they cut you a check every month. Like you also should be decent at running a business.
Absolutely, yeah. And you've hit upon a really important point there, because the success rate of small business acquisition is terrible. And
Wow,
I think
really?
it's because there is a lot of people out there teaching people how to go and buy a business. And to your point, they don't know how to run a business. And I liken it to the people who win the lottery and then 2 years later they're broke.
Hmm.
It's because they don't have the necessary mindset and skill set to manage the money. And if you take over a beautiful cash flowing business, it's been going for 20 years, it's churning out however much, but profit every single month, and you don't know those skills you mentioned before, HR, sales, marketing, operations, you're going to get into trouble.
Hmm.
So you either have to have that knowledge yourself, partner with someone who does, or bring in experts pretty quickly. So hire the right people.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about the risk assessment when you're looking at some of these deals, because as I understand it, in this world, it seems like it's less risk to, like, if you're listening, you're like, man, that sounds like me. I shouldn't, bite off more than I can chew. Let me just get this smaller business. They're doing whatever. They're doing 300K in revenue and they got 80 grand in profit or something like that. Like it's a small business and it's like the profit margin's high, but the profit margin's high probably because the owner's still doing 90% of the work. They haven't really hired any management. There's not really any sort of skilled labor underneath them. And they look at that as being like, okay, let me just buy this business because this one's easier. You know what I mean? It's smaller. But that's sort of counterintuitive though, right? Because if you just bought a business that was doing 2 million in revenue and had 350 grand in profit, the business would actually be set up in a way that would be better for you as being an inexperienced owner to run, because it's theoretically mostly running on its own where the owner is absent from the business, and you can step in and and have additional margin to hire whatever it is, a consultant to help you with the finance piece, or like to help fulfill the weakness that you have in running or operating the business. So how do you think about that, from at least from a beginner perspective? Like where should people be looking? Is that an accurate representation? Is that inaccurate? What's your thoughts on that?
I think it entirely depends on your goal. It's an accurate representation if you want to be an absent owner. So I'm not an operator. I'm not a very good operator. I'm more of a creative and a visionary. I can connect the dots that other people can't see, but I get bored very easily. So I'm not a very good operator, which is why I have an amazing team. However, if I was stacking shelves and I was earning 40 grand a year, and I could buy a business that made 80 grand a year and do all the work, that could be a great move, because I've doubled my my income. I'm my own boss. It's worth working more hours because I love what I do. So that could be the right move for someone. However, if you're looking to do this more as a career and become a deal maker, if you like, or become someone that's growing a group of companies, then absolutely buying a bigger business with, infrastructure that you can just plug in your senior managers to makes a lot more sense.
Not to mention, it's actually a little simpler to acquire financing for a deal like that, right? Because like some of these smaller deals might not even be approved by the SBA. Like there's not enough assets in the company for the SBA to value it as an actual business that they're willing to loan against.
100%. So in the UK at the moment, it's very difficult to borrow anything under seven figures,
Mm.
um, because there's more risk associated with the smaller deals. So most facilities out there are seven figures and up, where you've got stronger management team, you've got more clients, stronger suppliers, and there's less risk associated with that lending.
So in the health space specifically, Ross, where should people be looking in the health space? Is it because you mentioned you have your kind of pharmaceuticals, medical devices, which is kind of more traditional Western medicine based, but then you also have these nutritional companies that are much more focused on health and longevity. Is there a certain vertical within that sector that you're particularly excited about, or that you would recommend more people look into because this one doesn't require as much specialized knowledge or a background like I have or something like that?
Mm, I would encourage everyone to kind of stay in their lane, if you like. So, and what I mean by that is it's easier to build rapport and it's easier to buy a company if you understand or are passionate about something.
Mm.
So I wouldn't come over to healthcare if you're a carpenter, because you might not find it easy to build rapport with the owner or have anything in common.
Mm.
I would go and buy a carpentry business or,
Yeah.
a big woodworking mill. So I'm in healthcare because I love healthcare. I think it's a sensible investment because it's largely, I believe, recession proof because people will always be unwell, which seemingly at odds with the fact we're the most technologically advanced we've ever been. And you would imagine cleverer, our health seems to be deteriorating as we're consuming more, nutrient poor fast food and have all sorts of chemicals and herbicides and pesticides on them. But health is deteriorating. That will continue to be so for the next decade or so, I think. So it's a safe space to be in. We're living longer as well, which brings with it more chronic diseases associated with age. So as a sector, I think it's pretty safe as an investment.
Love it, man. Ross, thanks so much for doing this, dude. There's a lot of really great information we've gotten into today. As we get everything wrapped up, where can people go to get more from you?
The best place is LinkedIn. So just my name, you can see me with a cap on, as I always have, or my website, which is my name, just rosstomkins.co.uk.
Perfect. Ross Tomkins, that's Tomkins, rosstomkins.co.uk, or just look up Ross on LinkedIn, check out some of the content and things that they're putting out there. Guys, these are people who are out doing the thing. They're not just talking about it. They're not just writing about it. They're not just doing webinars about it. They're actually doing it. So go learn from the practitioners in the space. It's always a faster path to applied knowledge. So Ross, thanks so much for doing this. Everybody else listening, tuning in, remember, money only solves your money problems. But it's a little bit easier to solve the rest of your problems if you got some money in the bank. So let's solve that problem first here on the Travis Makes Money podcast. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you guys next time. Peace out.